Hello, this is Eric Morris Eskenazi. Thanks for tuning in to this latest episode of the Iraq Dispatches podcast. I am the host, and my latest guest is Debra S. Yates, who's the author of Woman of Many Names, which chronicles her seventh great-grandmother, Nancy Ward, also known as Nanyehi, a key figure in the history of the Cherokee Nation. Hello, thanks for listening to the Erratic Dispatches podcast. We'll be back shortly after a brief break. Hello, I've been using Anchor.fm now for about almost a year for the podcast Erratic Dispatches, which is distributed through Anchor.fm. It's completely free to use, very easy, and any audio that you upload or record through the website, it will be you can use it to organize your audio files, and once your podcasts are ready to submit, it will be available to stream within at least 8 different streaming sites. So, Debra, please, if you don't mind, start off with how did you first discover about your family history? About Nancy Ward, and I know that I saw an interview with you online where you said that you were related to her first husband, Kingfisher.
Yes, I'm a Kingfisher. Yes,
mm-hmm.
Yes, husband number one. So I'm more native than a lot of the Ward descendants because they got split in half there.
Yeah, so do you mind first talking about how did you first, as a little girl, I guess, were your relatives telling you stories about this?
Yeah, and that's exactly how that happened, sitting at my grandpa's feet, actually. And it was just, to me, an amazing story. He called her Nani, and he didn't call her Nanyehi. He did call her Nanyehi, and he did call her Nancy Ward, but mostly it was Nani, like a more personal type of thing. And he recanted to me the stories that his mother had told him. Now, my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Buffington Tittle, was supposed to be the one to write the story that I wrote. And when he gave me actually this ring that I have on, he had it made into a bracelet. It was a ring that belonged to Nancy Ward. And he had that made into a bracelet, a cuff bracelet for me when I was 12. And because I was the only one of the grandchildren that seemed to, take interest in his stories about, the Indians and living on the reservation and, kind of all that kind of stuff. So I guess I was the chosen one at that point. And also the arrowhead necklace that I wear here, just a necklace, just the arrowhead, actually went on the Trail of Tears with Nancy Ward's great-granddaughter to the Oklahoma Territory back in the 1830s. So really it was at my grandfather's feet that I fell in love with Nancy Ward and the stories that he had to tell about her.
Wow. And then when you started writing your book, Women of Many Names, how many years were you working on it for?
I worked on it for about 3 to 4 years, somewhere in that range. The beginnings of the book was basically, just me writing down the stories that he told me so that my great grandnieces and nephews would know those stories as well as the grandchildren. And I unfortunately never bore any children, but my brother had several. So I thought, these stories can't be lost and go to the grave with me. So I started writing them down, and my girlfriend says, well, why don't you give me those and I'll put them on a disc for you? I said, oh, okay, that'd be great. So when she, deciphered my writing, so to speak, she brought everything back to me. Probably about, a couple months later. And when she handed it to me, she was literally crying. And I said, what's wrong, honey? And she goes, you've got to write a book. This story needs to be told. She goes, because it'll be told from a different perspective. She says, I've done a little research and I can't find, other than Emmett Starr, really anybody that, has written about her from the family itself. I said, okay, well, let me think on that. I'm not the world's best speller. And I never did all that great in English, but I said, yeah, I can give that a whirl. And so I started ordering every single book that I could find, reading everything that I could online. And what I did was I melted together the stories that Grandpa told me, and some of the other relatives too that I had just, talked with over the years, and took those and everything I'd read and just blended it all together to make a story, something that actually somebody might pick up and read or want to read. So, there is some creative leeway, so to speak. A lot of prayer went into this book as I wrote it, and asking the creator to guide my writing, and to tell a story that people might actually want to know more about. And then folks can do their own research from there if they want to know more. And there is totally a lot more. I just wanted to make sure that my mother wasn't feeling well when I started writing this book, and I wanted her to see it published. So I probably rushed it a little more than what I should have. And then I thought, well, there's really nothing about her husband, Kingfisher, written that much. So I'm going to focus on her and him and the love story that they had. And, if I decide to go back and write another one, I can do that. So I have been, researching for years a lot of, different things that have come to, to the fore. And there's plenty more that can be written about her. And I do plan on doing one as soon as life settles down again for me. And it is a beautiful story. She was, a woman well before her time. And I think that the message that she had back in the 17 and 1800s is, still today fits today's what we're going through on a daily basis. I mean, back in the 1740s, smallpox ripped through their village and scarred her cousin and her uncle Oconostoa, and wiped out, as far as we can tell, minimum a third of the village. So, diseases come and diseases go, and they, leave scars on us like this one's going to leave on many generations. I think that it's, as time goes on and we can realize, what's happening even today and in our near future, what the truth may seem to be today may not actually be the truth. We don't know. So, I think it's an interesting concept. And she was an amazing woman. She literally held the power of life and death in her hands. If she wore a pair of swan wings, some people would disagree with me and say they were turkey wings, but I believe they were swan wings. And if she went like this with her hand, that meant you got to live. If she went like this, off with your head, so to speak. So she literally held the power of life and death in her hands for many people. The village she ran, Chota, was a village of sanctuary. So whoever made it into the village was safe. And till maybe you crossed the border, you weren't safe anymore. But the village was very large, and she ran it.
Wow. Like, I wasn't, familiar at all with Nancy Ward before I read your book, and I've been doing some research online, and I see that, I guess, is there already a museum there? I guess in Tennessee or Oklahoma for her, or is it are they still developing that?
There are, there's a new casino that has a small museum in it that's dedicated to her. They have named some streets out in Tahlequah after her. The site of the Eastern Band Cherokee also has a part of a museum that's, dedicated to her too. There was a small room in Sequoia's museum, but it was since been dismantled. So she no longer has something just totally dedicated to her. There is a place in Benton, Tennessee that has some artifacts and different things, a Nancy Ward room there that people can go in and do a little interactive village and Fort Loudon, which was just down the road from Chota. And that's where the English hung out in that fort. So yes, there are some things. Hopefully someday, we're hoping to get an interactive drive-through type thing or walk through at the gravesite where she is actually buried in Benton, just south of Benton. We're hopeful that something like that can happen. And the state, the TVA actually holds that land that where she's buried, where also her son Five Killer is buried, and her brother Longfellow is also buried there. So the three of them are together on top of a small foothill at the at the base of the Smoky Mountains. So it's quite interesting. I didn't know that she was buried there until I want to say '08. Had no idea. Unfortunately, the further you're away from things, and we were never exposed to Tennessee as children. We weren't. I made it out to the reservation at 21 and met some different family members there and got some more Nancy Ward stories and stories about my grandfather when he was a little boy, because his brothers and sisters, quite a few of them, stayed right there and never left. Now my grandfather left in the late 20s. They were literally starving to death. He was starving, and he moved to Florida with one of his older sisters and went to work in the fields around Winter Haven, Florida. So there's our Florida tie. My mom was born there and kind of breached out from there. Now, when they moved to Ohio, the Ohio Valley, it was a conscious decision not to tell anybody that they were Native American. They were told not to tell. As you can imagine, in the 40s and 50s, 30s, it wasn't, a good thing to be an American Indian. So that part of our lives was taken from us, I believe. I understand the conscious decision that my grandfather made for, a better life for his kids. And but we lost part of our heritage doing that also. I mean, I believe that his culture did shape our lives. However, we didn't understand why our family was so secretive. And, people would say, "Well, what's your heritage?" Because, I get brown as a berry and, and had that long black stunning hair and deep set eyes. And are you Italian? No, I don't know what I am. I have no idea. So I'd ask, pardon me, you're Scotch and Irish. Okay. And then when I was right around 12, I found out I was American Indian, and my mom goes, "Don't you tell Saul." Right. I went to school and told everybody I was Cherokee. So then it started making sense why I had the darker skin, the darker eyes, the dark hair, and was a little bit of a renegade. So it was time. It's time for the secrets to stop. And I think it's beautiful. Heritage is a beautiful thing, and we all should understand where we come from, and if we can, who our ancestors were. Now, not everybody's as fortunate to be able to trace themselves back like I've been able to do on many sides of my family now. But it tells a story about who you are. And when I found Nancy Ward's gravesite there, I was walking up the hill and going, my life makes sense. It makes sense. Everything makes so much sense. And why I've loved all the things that I've loved. And the more research I did, I collected swans and wolves and, just different. I always loved rocks and just nature things. And it made my life made sense for me. The more I discovered about her, I believe that the DNA remembers. I truly do believe that our DNA remembers. And, it's a beautiful thing for everybody to try to search that out if you can, and go on Ancestry or 23andMe. And, you got to start somewhere sometimes. And, you can, maybe get back, a couple hundred years and,
Mm-hmm.
see what led your family to be where they were. Maybe some of the idiosyncrasies that they have, you'll understand
Mm-hmm.
because of the way they were raised. So, not even fully, understanding what drives that,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak.
And then like I was like finding out that I guess and I wanted to find out from you, have you had a chance to see like I know they did like a stage production about Nancy Ward or like a
Yeah.
musical? Have you
Yes. Oh yeah.
Mhm.
My cousin Becky Hobbs, famous country western singer, mostly in the 70s and early
Mhm.
80s was, I would say, her big heyday. And she is, very in tune with her, Cherokee side also. And, God led us both to start writing. I started writing a book probably about 6 months to a year after she started writing the musical, the play. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. You just something that you really would have to see and feel um in person. It's a neat thing. She's amazing talent.
And have there been like any documentaries like made yet about Nancy Ward or any like shorts, like short features?
um Becky did do a short feature
Mm-hmm.
on the
Mm-hmm.
musical. And as far as I know, that's really about it. One of the Daniel Boone shows, Daniel Boone, the series,
Mm-hmm.
did do one show on Nancy Ward. The, connection there is, you know, fairly intimate
Mm-hmm.
connection there also. So, she did know him and, Thomas Jefferson. I believe she knew Nancy Ward. Now, Thomas
Mm-hmm.
Jefferson introduced her to, I believe, to George Washington. Now, can I prove that? No, I can't necessarily prove that, but a letter that was written to George Washington ended up in Thomas Jefferson's possession. So I have to assume
Mm-hmm.
that President Washington gave that to President Jefferson. So that would be a connection. Um, they during the Revolutionary War, I believe that is where that connection happened. Thomas Jefferson worked with other allies also to secure treaties and things that my grandmother was part of organizing, signing treaties that would have allowed the troops as well as George Washington to traverse areas that would have been normally, closed to them, or they would have been fighting, going on with the natives too. So, and I also had another grandmother, her name was Sarah Potts,
Mm-hmm.
that fixed him dinner
Mm-hmm.
at the Valley Forge, because I also have a connection to the Valley Forge, um, which made the weapons for that war. So, which comes from my grandmother, one of my grandmothers. So it's interesting how life intermingles and intertwines. I'm also a descendant from, on my father's side, the Brainards. The Brainards came to the Americas in the late 1600s and early 1700s from England and opened missionaries, uh, missions throughout the South and the Southwest to help the Native Americans. And that's my daddy's people.
Mm-hmm.
And that mission is literally 60 miles south of where Nancy was.
Mm-hmm.
And there is, some writings in the Brainards about a Native American woman that does fit Nancy Ward's description. And also the Moravian missionaries also have writings about Nancy Ward also showing up at their mission. So um, the Cherokee Indian in particular, we converted very easily to Christianity because our belief systems were, I believe, the same already. We just called them a different name, but the symbolisms were all there. We just converted very easily. So that's because our belief systems were so similar.
Mm-hmm.
So we tried to assimilate to the white culture to get along. We adopted a lot of their habits of dressing in our clothes and so on and so forth. Did we try to keep our ways? Well, of course. Did we have to hide a lot of that? Of course. And then when our families were, excommunicated to Oklahoma, so to speak, they tried to wipe that from our culture. We weren't allowed to speak our language. We weren't allowed to practice our old beliefs. Our children were taken from us and raised in orphanages. That's what I call them. They were like orphanages, schools where they could be broken of those old traditions and treated very unkindly when they were caught, speaking their language or practicing their beliefs. So, it goes back, the pain goes back so far that, and they've now proven that even as though they believe that we are a depressed people because we are a conquered people. And all Native American tribes were conquered people, and it changed our DNA. And when you do that to people, it changes them, and not for the better. It didn't change the Native Americans for the better. And I believe we're still seeing a lot of trauma today from that. And, like alcoholism and drug abuse and so on and so forth. Alcoholism calls out the weakest of the species. And I think that's why we lost so many people over the years, is because our bodies just, we weren't used to it. Now, if you were raised in Europe, France, wherever, you were drinking when you were 4 or 5 years old. You were drinking wine because the water wasn't fit, or, so it came so late in our culture that it really hurt us as a people.
And like, Debra, since your book came out, like, have you had a chance to like come to schools and like speak to like students like history classes?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've had such an amazing journey these last, well, not in the last year or so, but the last 5 years have been amazing. And Bruce has opened a lot of doors for me. And I've tried to walk through every one that I can in her name. I always wear her arrowhead that was part of hers, and the ring. I wear that. I formed it into a ring. It was a bracelet, but obviously I'm not 12 anymore. So I do it in her honor. Every penny I've made off this book, plus many pennies more, has all gone back to the grave site, or it'd been donated for, towards the play, and different things like that. My goal, it wasn't necessarily to make money. I just wanted her story out there, and given this opportunity, I thought, I've got to do everything I can. She's worth knowing about. History has neglected my grandmother, my 7th grade grandmother, Nancy Ward. It's neglected her. She did marvelous, marvelous things. She saved settlers and colonialists, and, lots and lots of people that wouldn't be here today had my grandmother not, put herself out there and warned those villages and those towns. My cousin's on his way. Dragging Canoe is on his way, and he plans on wiping out your village. Go run to the mountains, hide. And her son was even part of some of those raiding parties. And but her conscience just would not allow her to sit back and allow, women and children, especially children, to be killed. And that took a lot of courage to do. And there are some people, even in the Cherokees, that believe Nancy Ward was a traitor to her people. And my answer to those people is absolutely not a traitor. She was trying to assure our place in history, assure that we didn't get our lands ripped from us. Her famous speech is, do not give up your lands. Do not secede any more of your lands. Please keep your lands. they want our land, they want our gold mines, they want our copper mines, they want our silver, they want our resources, and they don't care what happens to us. So don't give any more away. And and she wanted us to live in peace alongside the white people. And so she married a white man, trying to help in that also. Um, so she's robbed of her place in history. That's my personal belief. And if I can, bring awareness to her story, and that's what I plan to do for the rest of my life, however I can. And Becky is the same way. We are on the same team, and it's about Nancy. It's not about our lives necessarily anymore. It's about hers and what we can do to perpetuate her story.
And like, have you like thought about like adapting your book maybe into like a graphic novel or some sort of like interactive sort of thing, like online?
I really haven't thought about that, I guess. I am like totally illiterate with the computer. I mean, I was giving myself an atta girl for just getting everything to get on here on Zoom. But those are wonderful ideas. And I should consider that. Bruce is working on a couple things, and so stay tuned. Things may be happening. And that's my prayer, that, in God's time, when the time is right, it will happen. And, Becky's laid out the format. I've laid out a format, and I've been told by many people the book reads like a screenplay, and that it would adapt very easily to that type of work. And I believe she's, fitting of that. We need to bring, the history, of course, needs to be brought in, the ties to, Jefferson and Boone, and, the Ben Franklin. I've had another one of my cousins telling me Ben Franklin stories. He wanted my grandma. She was considered beautiful. Daniel Boone said she was the most handsome woman he'd ever seen. So, and that's a quote out of one of his books. So that's what I said. I do believe she was robbed of her place in history. I mean, Sacagawea is an amazing woman, Pocahontas, which she is probably descended from. They're fairly certain that her father was Powhatan, and several generations removed from Pocahontas, but from that line. So there is that connection there also. So she was born and bred to lead. And there had been, prophecy in the Cherokees that there would be a woman rise from the Wolf clan that would lead her clan to greatness. And I believe they recognized that very early in her life, and she was trained to do what she did. And by Oconostoa, by Attakullakulla, by Matoy, by Lucy Ward, who was a lady in waiting to the Queen of England and fell in love with Oconostoa while he was in England spying on them. Two of my uncles went on that cruise on the Fox to England in the 1700s, and their father wanted to know what they were up against. And when they went to England, they said, we can't stop these people. I forget the exact quote that there was, but there was so many of them, we could never overrun them, because they went to England and saw how many people were there, and knew the how wealthy they were and how strong they were. So we had a good idea, a better idea, I think, maybe than most tribes, because we got to go and we got to come back and tell the stories of what they saw. And there was actually a couple books written about that. And I wish I could remember the name of them right now, but there's just so much, what was the name of that book? Oh, The Crown of Tennessee. See, Tennessee, we called it Tennessee. TANNESSEE. I believe is how it was spelled. If you,
Mm-hmm.
you know, flipped it over, and then the white folks got a hold of it and made it
Mm-hmm.
Tennessee, so it's a
Mm-hmm.
mouthful. But it was called the Crown of Tennessee. He sent a raccoon cap
Mm-hmm.
cap
Mm-hmm.
to the King of England, to King George the second or the third. I think it was the second. And I thought that was kind of an interesting story. I did read it. It was good. I really, really enjoyed it a lot.
Hello, thanks for listening to the Erratic Dispatches podcast. We'll be back shortly after a brief break. Have you been involved with any kind of nonprofits or foundations to further education about the history of different Native American tribes in the U.S.?
I've donated money to different
Mhm.
organizations. As far as doing any of that work myself, no.
Mm-hmm.
I figure I'm doing my part. I'm not a recognized member of any tribe, even though I am a certified
Mm-hmm.
descendant of Nancy Ward. I am in the process of trying to become a Cherokee citizen.
Mm-hmm.
I will hopefully know within the next few months if that's going to come to fruition. They closed it. They literally closed those departments down for the last year and a half.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not been a lot of research done
Mm-hmm.
on that yet. But I'm hoping that happens and I can become a citizen, and that will allow me a little more latitude
Mm-hmm.
going forward. Yeah, that's why I see that.
And do you mind talking about a little about how Nancy Ward had something to do with dairy? I guess she was one of the first Native
Yes,
Americans to sort of incorporate dairy or something
she
like that.
did. Okay. Well, I have to think for a hot second here what that lady's name was. She saved the governor's wife, and they were going to kill her. And right now, honey, the name just is eluding me. Her name, Lydia Bean. Her name was Lydia Bean, and Governor Bean's wife was abducted by bad Cherokee Indians
Mm-hmm.
that were a little upset about something. I don't know what it was. And so they took her prisoner, and somehow or another, Nancy found out that this white woman had been taken prisoner. So she went and got her and brought her into the village of Chota and nursed her back to health. Don't know how long she was there. Don't think there's any specific, numbers, if she was there days, weeks, month, a year. And that once she got her nurse back to health, she was returned to her husband. And after that, they became very good friends. And Lydia gave my grandmother cows. Now, our idea was just to use the milk. The meat, they found the meat to make them too sluggish. So, but the milk saved babies because, if you couldn't produce enough milk, your child would perish if you couldn't find a wet nurse, so to speak, in the village. So it did afford our children better survivability. They were healthier, stronger. And then, of course, we did start eating the beef at some juncture. But I thought that was, kind of an interesting way. So she is credited for introducing the cow into our culture.
Wow.
Yeah. But really, it was Lydia. Lydia hadn't given her the cows. We might never, it would have been a while. But the buffalo, I believe the buffalo were basically wiped out in the early 1700s in that region. There was literally a smaller buffalo that, traversed the eastern United States, and it just got wiped out. And white people, Indians, disease, multitudes of things. So that's how that went. So we lost that resource.
Wow.
And it became a lot of deer and rabbit and, different things like that. And we grew corn, tobacco. That stuff was always part of our, as far back as anybody can tell.
Hmm.
Squash were things that beans, they loved beans. They still do.
Hmm.
Beans and cornbread. You go out to
Hmm.
Cherokee Nation and that's at
Hmm.
the top. You
Hmm.
beans and cornbread. So it's, still alive today, as I grew up on beans and cornbread, so that, when I was saying, we were still influenced by that culture and not really knowing why. My grandfather ate beans every day and cornbread if you could get my grandmother to make it every day.
And
Or
then,
how it's hard.
and like, since your book came out, like, and you've gone to done different like readings or public events, like, has anybody like approached you that said that they were descendant as well?
Oh, yes, yes. I've
Mm-hmm.
met many Boones.
Mm-hmm.
I've been approached by many Boone family members. Of course, Nanyehi also. I'll be at the gravesite. We rededicated the gravesite about 3 years ago. Someone at TVA decided to level a
Mm-hmm.
great part of it without going through our cultural heritage
Mm-hmm.
center and people that would have come and checked the land to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that there was nothing there
Mm-hmm.
before they did so. So I think I was a great part in not becoming a big controversial thing. I basically negotiated for the Cherokee Nation and the Cherokee people with TVA and Parks Department. And we got the area, cleaned back up. And actually, it's better now. They didn't
Mm-hmm.
remove any of the land, they just moved it
Mm-hmm.
around. But that's still to the American Indians a very sacred place. And I believe that Kingfisher was pulled out there because that land that got built on had at one point belonged to her brother, um, Longfellow. That was his home area. And I was told that on the way home, he was pulled out there on
Mm-hmm.
poles as a corpse. So, you know, but if is it true?
Mm-hmm.
How you really going to know? To some respect. So, but there could have been artifacts around, and there are many artifacts that have been chucked up in her
Mm-hmm.
gravesite that people have found around there. I
Mm-hmm.
found arrowheads down by the river, and that's where my grandmother lived. So I don't know whose they were. There was a bullet, like a
Mm-hmm.
musket bullet,
Mm-hmm.
and four arrowheads that I found like right basically together. And there was one white arrowhead. There was a point sticking up out of the ground, and I'm going, oh, it's like a point of an arrowhead. So I went over
Mm-hmm.
and started messing around the bank, and
Mm-hmm.
I think three arrowheads and a musket bullet.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? So, anyways, and a lot of times when you find things like that, they will be reburied somewhere on the property. And so it's just hard to tell what all's around there. And we do know that she was buried elsewhere before she was buried there. Longfellow actually outlived his sister, and Five Killer, her son, of course, outlived her also. She died in 1822, and I believe her brother went in 24, and I think Five Killer went, I think, in the early 30s. And he actually lived there. In some of the old pictures in the early 1900s where it was dedicated, they put markers there from the DAR. They said it was her final resting place. So in old articles I read, so that to me tells me they knew she was moved multiple times. I know from old timers in the area that she was moved at least twice, and before being placed on the hill where she's at now. So they're all up there together, and I think they're happy about that. There's a man named Dr. Bones, and his name is Arthur Bohannon. Do some research on Arthur Bohannon. Amazing man. And he's the one that did all the graveyards for decomposition around the United
Mm-hmm.
States. he's behind that whole thing. And he is in love with my grandmother, Nancy Ward. And he's done quite a bit of work around the Tennessee, South Carolinas, and actually, all over the place, helping, find bodies, where they were buried and stuff like that. So a remarkable man there. Shout out to Arthur Bohannon.
Wow. And like for the Cherokee Nation, were they like at one point like nationwide or only on certain states or certain parts of the U.S.?
The Cherokee were basically Kentucky, the Carolinas, Tennessee, and northern Georgia, a little bit into Alabama. We held Lookout Mountain for, hundreds and hundreds of years. And they always said whoever held Lookout Mountain held the area. So yes, that they sold Kentucky to Daniel Boone because it was our hunting grounds. That was our summer hunting ground. They would go up there and hunt. And Daniel Boone, they called him Wide Mouth because he sang. And see, we thought he was crazy. And you don't hurt crazy people. So everybody thought he was crazy. So everybody just left that man alone. And so that's why we sold Kentucky, because they knew they couldn't hold it. And then the Carolinas, of course, when the removal happened, that's where they were. They went up into the hardest terrain that you can fathom to hide. And they hid for years. Nobody knew they were there for a decade or so. And by that time, everything had calmed down. And, Andrew Jackson wasn't president anymore. He did us no favors, trust me. And my uncle, Five Killer, worked for him. He served in the War of 1812. As far as I'm concerned, right alongside Andrew Jackson. And why he didn't like us, I'm not really certain, but I suppose if we delved into his past, his young life, we might be able to figure out why he wasn't too crazy about the American Indians. But the Congress tried to stop him. They said no, it wasn't right, but it didn't matter. He was running the military, so it happened. And history, just bears that out. And it's, I believe that why there's so many Nancy Ward descendants, and there's a lot of us, trust me, there's a lot of us, is because Nancy, told our family, I believe that, her foresight, her, psychic ability, if that's what you want to call it, she knew things. She had the knowing. She just knew things. And she said, I see my people walking in a line with tears streaming down their face. And that's where Trail of Tears came from. And that was 30 years. She said that 30 years before the Trail of Tears even happened. And, she told our family, we all knew we're not going to be able to hold on to this. And so my family went as what was called old settlers. Most of my family did anyways. And they moved out west, Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas. They removed themselves, so they weren't forcibly removed. That way they got to go much better than being rounded up in the middle of the night with, whatever you had on. If you had no shoes, you had no shoes. If you had no jacket, you had no jacket. That's the way you left your home. That's the way you went on that trail. And, it's probably one of the most shameful things in our background but, I'm not saying everything happens for a reason. And, we're that part of history, just like the Black people are that part of that history. And we at least not forget that, or history will repeat itself again, and in some shape, form, manner. And that will be the biggest shame if we as a people in this country allow anything similar to
Mhm.
that ever happened for any reason, no
Mhm.
matter what it is,
Mhm.
no matter the things that we're talking about today.
Mhm.
This, man against brother and
Mhm.
sister, fighting over vaccines.
Mhm.
Vaccines, really,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, you know, we all should have the right to choose what we do with our bodies or don't do with
Mhm.
our bodies. It's no man's right to tell me what to do with my body. Um, Needs to be a choice, and nobody should be made to feel shameful whether they took it or they didn't take it. That's, I see that going on as you do yourself.
Mhm.
As long as you're, being, a fair-minded person, you have to know that's not right. It's not fair to anybody. And, so that could be another way history could repeat itself. Um, you know, Not that I'm leaning to be a conspiratory person, but I'm part Cherokee. I got no
Mhm.
reason to trust. Okay.
Mhm.
My family had no reason to
Mhm.
trust. And like I said earlier, that bears out in how we were raised. Those of us, and I admire my cousins that were able to, grow up in Tahlequah and out there in Oklahoma and know their relatives and know their history and know the language. I've tried to learn the language in one ear and out the other.
Mhm.
Wado is about it, and Ushti. That's about as close as I
Mhm.
can get to speaking our language, and which is sad, but my brain just won't retain it.
Mhm.
I didn't grow up with it, and I've listened to those tapes probably 100 times. Just can't keep it in my brain. And maybe that's just the way it's supposed to be for me. And but I do truly admire those that have been able to keep that part of our culture alive. And I keep hoping that that Rosetta Stone will offer some of the native languages one of these days to people like me that would love to learn it and just are having a hard time with it. But it's a beautiful language. Oh, to sit and listen to them talk. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so melodic. And, um, you know, I got to see Wes Sluty out
Mhm.
at the Cherokee Nation restaurant one day. He's so beautiful. And Wilma Mankiller and her husband, just beautiful, beautiful people that, just truly had nothing but the best interest of the Cherokee as a whole, whether you were Eastern Band or Western Band, I believe, because there is a division and it is two
Mhm.
separate bands. And then there's the Kituas or Kitawa, whatever you want to say that, because they can't even agree if it's Kitua or Kitawa. It's like, and we're never going to know because, it was forced from us.
Mhm.
And, the language wasn't hardly spoke for so many years that, we've lost some stuff. So, but I think as a people, the American Indians are doing the best that they can and shouldn't be judged for how they choose to live because they want to live like their ancestors lived. I think nature just, it's their soul. It's their
Mhm.
soul. And that's hard for a lot of people to understand that, just don't understand. But they shouldn't be looked down on it because that's how they feel. And it's like watching this show Yellowstone. They haven't really named that Native American tribe, so to
Mhm.
speak, but Rudy Ramos, who played Atakula Kula in the Nanyehi play, is in Yellowstone. So I make sure to watch it just to see if Rudy's gonna, get in on any of the shows. But beautiful man, just a beautiful man.
Like, and researching your when you're writing your book, like, was there anything that really like, um, was there anything that, like, any fact that you found out while writing it that really, like, that shocked you, that you were just like blown away by, that you weren't aware of before?
Say the smallpox
Yeah.
that we discussed a little bit earlier
Mhm.
was
Mhm.
probably one of the most shocking things to me. Um, I didn't. I knew that that Nancy was a warrior woman, but I didn't realize the depth of that until, I did a little more research and found out, more of the details in that war that happened. And one of the most shocking things, or exciting shocking things, Bryant Ward, which ended up being her second husband, was actually on one of the hills where the Battle of Talawa happened, watching my grandma kick butt.
Wow.
And then that is where my grandfather Kingfisher perished. And she picked up his spear and yelled the war cry, and they had been ordered into a retreat, and the braves warriors turned around and went with my grandma, because she was going with or without him, didn't matter. She was going after the man that killed her man, and she was 3-4 months pregnant at the time, so she was carrying 5 killer during that battle. I find that to be truly amazing also, that she could be, that she was that strong. She was just that strong. And she was a tall woman by all descriptions, tall. We don't know what that means, but the Wolf Clan in general, we tend to be taller, bigger people than some of the other clans, are the more fine bone, more tiny people. So I found that to be, quite amazing.
And you said right now you're currently working on something right now, or a follow-up?
Well, let me tell you, that's an interesting story. It might be a little long for you. When about 3 years ago, my computer went down on me, and I lost all my writings. Oh yeah, it was a bad day. I got real depressed over it. And where I thought they were backed up, they weren't. So anyways, I thought, okay, well, I'm going to hire a geek here. So I hired this geeky person, geek person, and I bought a new computer, and they put it all on the computer. Well, don't you know? And they did save the hard drives and the thumbnail. So I was able to locate all that stuff, and I, on the third geek, found it all.
Wow.
So in August, the end of August, I actually got it all back. Great. So now it's just finding the time to get back at it. So hopefully in the next year, I'll be able to eke out some time, and because it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
I'm not a natural born writer, and I've told everybody that would listen, I didn't write this book. The book wrote itself. And so, I needed to get those, because I was like, I had 3 started. I was like, I don't know how to start again. I just don't know how to start again. So thank God he saw fit to, give me those writings back. And I'm planning on getting back to it this next coming year, and sit down and just clear my mind. And I'm probably going to go back to Tennessee. I wrote a lot of that book in Tennessee on the Ocoee River in a really cute cabin. And my plan is to go back there in March or April and rent that cabin again, and just start over. And hopefully, get a good outline on it again. And I've got the knowledge is in here. I just got to get it down here. So it's been fun doing all these events and talking to people like you, Eric. And it's been a blessing. She blessed me with something to do in my old age, and I'm going to try to do her justice. That's all I know.
Hello, thanks for listening to the Erratic Dispatches podcast. We'll be back shortly after a brief break. Thanks again for tuning in to this latest episode of the Erratic Dispatches podcast, featuring an interview with Debra S. Yates, author of Woman of Many Names, a chronicle about her 7th great-grandmother, Nancy Ward, also known as Nanyehi. For the Anchor FM profile page on this podcast episode, I've included links in which you could purchase Woman of Many Names from Amazon, and there's also a Facebook page for it. In addition to that, I do have contribution donation buttons located on both my Anchor FM page and also on my website for Iraq Dispatches through brooklyndigitalmediainc.com. Any kind of contribution, donation from my listeners would be greatly appreciated. Thanks again for tuning in to Iraq Dispatches, and I'll be back soon with a new episode. Take care. Bye-bye.